Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to continue a series where I've been discussing popular and also underrated endgame unique items, and today I'm going to be talking about Shadowstitch. Now, Shadowstitch is an interesting item in that it is somewhat deterministically farmable, much more so than other popular endgame items, like for instance Impulse's Broken Heart or Chevron's Wrappings, that are much harder to target farm, take a very large number of maps. Instead, you have a 1 in 4 chance of creating a Shadowstitch when you use Alva's Corruption Altar on one of the Atziri specific crafting bases. This is the Sacrificial Garb. Now, this video is an update / correction / retraction of a previous video that I'd done discussing Shadowstitch, and that's because I've done a fair bit of digging around and ascertained that some of the information in my first video was wrong. I'll come to how I work this out at the end, but the Sacrificial Garb needs to be in a scoured state. Ascertain that by analysing all of the different failed attempts at creating a Sacrificial Garb that were available in the Ritual Softcore Trade League, and came to the conclusion that I'm comprehensively certain that you cannot get a Shadowstitch by attempting to implicit corrupt a Sacrificial Garb that is not already scoured. So, what's the process? Essentially, farm up a Corruption Altar through normal gameplay. That's much easier in the current league than it has been in the past, and the reason for that is some of the Glennach Cairns Atlas passives. So you have Resource Reallocation, which means that if you have a Tier 1 Corruption Chamber and you attempt to upgrade it to Tier 2, you will have a 50% chance to leapfrog over Tier 2 and go directly to Tier 3. Additionally, though, it's not just the effect that this has on the Corruption Chamber room. In my current temple, I had a Tier 1 Fire room. Resource Reallocation procced and leapfrogged over Tier 2 directly to Tier 3, and that meant that that Fire room was no longer in the pool of rooms that incursions would attempt to enter. And so that meant that I had more chances to hit the Corruption Chamber as well. And I think you'll find that you get the same thing. Secondly, you have Contested Development, which means that if you kill a Resident Architect in an area, so that means if you swap the room around, then it adds their upgrade tier to the surviving Architect's room. So that means that if you've got a Tier 2 Fire room, and you've got two choices, either upgrade to Tier 3 Fire room or start over as a Tier 1 Corruption Chamber, you actually won't start over as a Tier 1 Corruption Chamber, you go all the way to Tier 3. So it will keep the 2 tiers that the Fire Architect had, and also gain an additional one. So between Contested Development and Resource Reallocation, it's much easier to get Corruption Chambers than it has been in the past. Bonus fun fact, you can also get to this point in the Maven sort of passive tree for Glennach Cairns quite easily. All you need to do is beat the 3 boss fight and the 4 boss fight that the Maven sets you, and you've got these. And then ultimately anything else you do on top of that is gravy, and will just make it so that you're getting more XP while you get the same number of Corruption Chambers as you would get in lower tier maps. So with that in mind, it's much easier to get Corruption Chambers than it has been in the past. This has also meant that using them to try and create Shadowstitch has a much lower opportunity cost than it's had in the past. So how do you prepare your Shadowstitch? Well, once it has been turned into Shadowstitch, assuming that it is, it will lose the ability to be modified. And that means you're going to need to get maximum quality on it first. So I prepared a resonator with a primitive chaotic resonator with a perfect fossil in it. I would have used an alchemical resonator, but I just didn't have one. So I'm going to use an alchemy orb on this Sacrificial Garb first. So now it's a rare sac garb, and I'm going to throw a perfect fossil on it. And you'll see I've hit 22 quality. I'm actually content with that. It could try and get more, but for the moment, I'm just going to settle with that because I only have 1 perfect fossil, and trade in this game is horrible. Now, there's a very important step. You need to scour the item at this point. If you don't do this, you will not have a chance of generating a Shadowstitch. Now, let's use the Corruption Altar and see if we actually get one, because that'd be great. And there we go. There are 4 possible outcomes that can happen when you use the Corruption Altar on an item. It has a 1 in 4 chance of outright deleting the item, and you just got to see that there. It has a 1 in 4 chance of removing up to 2 implicits from the item and adding 2 Vaal implicits. And as an extra effect, when this happens to a to a Sacrificial Garb that has no mods on it, that item becomes a Shadowstitch. It has a third possibility, which is to re-roll the mods and the sockets, and also to apply a random influence. This is generally bad, people call it bricking. And there's a fourth outcome, also equally likely, where it bleaches all of the sockets on the item white. So we weren't able to get a Shadowstitch there, so rather than showing you one I've prepared myself, at this point I'm going to jump out into the trade economy, and we'll have a look at the Shadowstitches other players have available for trade. And you'll see here that there's several Shadowstitches available. Since my last video, they've gone up in price a little bit, but the mods on this item are pretty impressive. So firstly, it is always 2 implicit corrupted. And that's why it has this mod, has 1 additional implicit mod. So it's corrupted as normal, but it has 2 implicit corruptions rather than 1. Next, it'll give you 20 to 30 to all attributes, and a big chunk of increased armor, evasion, and energy shield. This is not the greatest armor / evasion / energy shield base in the world, but it's sort of pretty good. It's also very effective on the extremely rare build that uses both energy shield and molten shell, but that is extremely rare. Those builds would use iron reflexes, and on a build like that, this is roughly 2500 armor and also 240 energy shield. No joke at all. But the reasons that you're using it are these 2 mods here. Recover 3 to 5% of life on kill, recover 3 to 5% of energy shield on kill. So on a typical build that has, say, let's say you're a life build first. If you have 7,000 life, this is going to recover you up to 210, 280, or 350 life every time you kill a monster. That's really big. And what this effectively means is that in conjunction with a couple of other effects that modify your life recovery rate, you're essentially invincible against weak monsters. So in places like the Simulacrum, you can just attack monsters pretty confident that the small stuff isn't going to kill you because you'll be recovering life faster than small chip hits can take it down. And then you've got the same mod for energy shield. Recover 3% of energy shield on kill, 3 to 5%. So if you're playing an energy shield based build, because the Shadowstitch is only giving you 240 energy shield itself, you're probably not going to have a tremendous amount of ES, but let's say that you've got, say, 6,000 energy shield on a build with a quite small life pool. This is going to be considerable energy shield recovery as well. And again, serves the same effective purpose, rendering you not quite totally immune to chip damage, but pretty close to it. Then we have the interesting effects. So, you have a reward and a penalty for each corrupted item you have equipped. Firstly, let's talk the penalty. -6% to all resistances for each corrupted item equipped. Now this varies from -6 to -4, so obviously -4 is the best roll possible. And this is a bit worse than it sounds because it does apply to chaos resistance. So you're going to want to invest heavily in chaos resistance elsewhere, or alternately, you can just take an attitude of, you know what, chaos damage is going to kill me if it comes in big quantities. I'm just going to try and avoid it, but I'm not really going to mitigate against it. In exchange for trying to solve that problem though, and also for possibly investing some cluster jewel mods in high tier resistances, you'll be paid off with 6% increased life for each corrupted item equipped, and 8% maximum energy shield for each corrupted item equipped. Now these are global increases, so that's not just the energy shield that's provided by Shadowstitch, that's the energy shield of your entire character. And as a result, this is a really significant mod. It is possible to equip an equip a corrupted item in something like 11 different inventory slots, I think. And do remember that your trinket slot counts as equipped, so it's going to be one. Shadowstitch itself is one. And so this can be, you know, almost 90. This can be sort of Skin of the Lords level increase to global energy shield, but unlike Skin of the Lords, it's coming on a chest that actually has some energy shield on itself. Likewise, the increase to life is pretty significant. The best sort of character to use Shadowstitch on, in my opinion, is a character that is able to, that gets a lot of its resistances by accident. So if your passive tree paths through a number of resistance nodes, then Shadowstitch is really good to consider. Additionally, it's also really good on builds that have a hybrid defense where you are both scaling life and also simultaneously scaling energy shield. These builds can be difficult, but they definitely can work. In terms of the socketing situation, so Shadowstitch is always 6 linked. It has a hidden mod that the item is always six sockets and 6 links. The colors can be changed by the crafting bench. Additionally, it's actually quite an easy item to recolor because it has 66 strength, dex, and int requirements. So what this means, because those are all equal, it doesn't favor any particular type of socket color over another. So if you wanted to socket this to be, say, 3 blue, 3 red, 0 green, you're probably not going to have that hard a time doing that. You'll need to use Varichi's crafting bench to do it because, the Helena's crafting bench now. I always call it Varichi because that's what we termed it before the betrayal system came in and overhauled all of the old masters. So you'll need to use the crafting bench to do it from Helena, and that is going to cost you an additional cost. Each attempt is going to cost you at the minimum 4 chromatic orbs and 4 Val orbs. However, for a powerful piece of endgame armor, it's worth it. Ultimately, I think Shadowstitch is one of the most interesting and underrated items in the game. So just quickly talk about how it was that I ascertained for certain that Shadowstitch requires you to use a scoured item. What I did was I had a look in the trade system and I looked for sacrificial garbs and I looked for non-unique ones. So let's just not go there, let's go to here. Any non-unique, and did a quick search at what was available. Next thing I did was I insisted that the items be corrupted. And that means that someone has made an attempt to turn them into a sacrificial garb, or maybe they've done something else weird and wonderful. And I also changed it to include offline results. So I see here that there's 120 results. And I started looking down the list for ones that had implicit corruptions on them. And the only ones I was able to find were ones that were rares, ones where someone has gone and rolled the item trying to make a decent set of armor before turning around and selling it. Based upon that, because I found enough of these sorts of items where it's not influenced, and so that means that someone has rolled this item and has then gone and thrown this into the, this one, was this too, this I think is the Atziri base. So just basically each of these items tells a story of a sort as to exactly what was done with it. Vortex Carapace was put into the 2 implicit corruption device and was bricked into a hunter rare. And so that's the story that this one tells. And I was looking through for the story of one that was a white item that was put in, so it was a scoured item, and that came back 2 implicit corrupted, and there were absolutely none of them. And based on this, I was able to conclude pretty comprehensively that it is indeed only scoured sacrificial garbs that can turn into Shadowstitch, because I found plenty of rare ones that had 2 implicit corruptions on them, and so I was confident that those ones, that their story, if you like, was that they had been rolled first, then they, once they were into a solid rare, they were then 2 implicit corrupted, and they actually got 2 implicit corruptions. Anyway, that's all I got on Shadowstitch. That is an update / retraction / correction of the last video. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.